The art club welcomes Tommy Barr, and I would like to introduce him, and then I'll turn it over to him. So I found this introduction for Tommy, and I just want to read some of it here. He's regularly described as a Renaissance man. He's a Northern Ireland-based artist and designer. Tommy has spent most of his working life in outskirts of the capital city of Belfast. And this is something I didn't know. He did a recent 15 million euro redesign of Belfast's digital infrastructure, focused on building the environment for a next generation of artists. He previously designed the data warehouse for the Lord Chancellor's Department in London, England. This provided information to support decision-making for the redesign of the UK's justice system. That's something else we can ask Tommy about. He's also a cyclist, has participated in many competitions, but he is most known as an artist. He's exhibited extensively across Europe, the Middle East, and beyond. Considers this travel as an essential part of his practice. And he finds inspiration in the lives of those he meets and the places they inhabit. His work is in major public collections, including National Galleries of Jordan and Bulgaria, the French National Archive, and National Museums of Ireland, Romania, and Malta. His work relies on symbolism, reflecting the world around him via a distinctive and very personal form of abstraction. In discussing his work, Clodagh Doyle, curator of the National Museum of Ireland, observes that the land determines the people's existence and shapes an identity linking them to the landscape. Tommy's works further define our connection to our land, to our beliefs, and to our identity. He is a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts in the UK and executive member of the International Academy of Digital Arts and Sciences in New York City. Welcome, Tommy, and we are honored to have you.
I hope you hear me well and can fathom what I'm saying through my accent. It'll be, I guess, a little unfamiliar to you, but that was what I was thinking as I was thinking what to say to you. And I was thinking about my accent and how I talk, and our accents are a reflection of where we have lived, and the history of that place and how we talk, and how we use our language, the expressions that we use, that we choose to use, and expressions that we would choose never to use. And those have changed over time as well. There are now things that I wouldn't say that I used to say, etc. So I have a raft of language and words and expressions that I can use to express myself. I have my physical voice, which I'm told sounds a lot like my brother's. But that's my voice box and my genetics, and I took that from my parents. There's also how much exercise I take, if I have smoked, what I eat. Our speech also changes between formal and informal, and we speak to different people in different ways. And I was thinking, our artistic voice, how we talk, our visual voice, should be the same thing. And in the same way that my friends who are poets and writers will take from my genre and say they're using colorful language, I think I should take from their genre and say, I'm painting in my native tongue. And to me, painting should be, I should paint the way I speak from within me and within my history and my beliefs and my, from me. So I have a choice of mediums and subjects. I have a choice of techniques, and I can choose between degrees of abstraction and, the surface text, how much texture and how smooth surfaces are. So I make, in the same way as I make a whole lot of choices about how I speak, but some of how I speak is not a choice, my painting is the same in that I make a lot of choices about how I paint, all informed by my history. So I thought what I would do is give you a little look at the visual language or the history of art in my country. This is my environment where I grew up, and I thought it would be nice for you to see, just to see a little of the art from here and how it has developed. And particularly for students, it's nice to know about the art of other cultures and other places. So if you can move the slides, Thomas, the first slide is, this is the earliest art in my country. These are megalithic, prehistoric chambers or tombs that we have dotted across Ireland. 3,200 BC. The pyramids are about 3,000. Well, pyramids are about 2,600. Stonehenge is about 3,000. So these go back before Stonehenge, before the first pyramids. That's kind of the age of the structures. If you look at them, they're mounds. What we have is a little door, and directly above the door you have a window. They're all built like this. Through the door you'll go down a little corridor and into a room in the center, the chamber. Round the edge there are stones which are referred to as curbstones, and along both sides of the little corridor there are stones referred to as standing stones that create, if you like, the wall of the chamber. If you move to the next slide then, which is Newgrange, it lets you see better. The door has been tidied up on this particular tomb, and it has been made safe for guests to go in and see. The stones around the edge are all decorated or engraved, if you like. So the stone, the curbstone at the front door of Newgrange is one of the most decorated and most important objects in Ireland. It's one of our treasures. What happens is of interest though. On the morning of winter solstice, the sun rises, shines through the window and illuminates the chamber inside, but only on winter solstice. So it's a very precise alignment that has happened here. So you can see in the other two shots, you can see a view down the corridor, down the little hallway and into the chamber. And on the morning of the solstice, the sun moves across the back wall of the chamber and hits the back stone and illuminates that. Some of the engraving inside the chamber is some of the actual engravings are in very strange places. They're not easily seen. But it is clear that it's as important where they are as what they are. And the light shining across is more evidence that they're placed in very specific places, not to be easily seen, but to be where they need to be. So this really is installation. So when I hear people say painting is old, installation is the new, I kind of smile inside because we've only been doing installation for 5,000 years. So a very early example of an installation, I think. If you move to the next slide then, Thomas, we're jumping forward to 2000 BC, which is the Bronze Age. This was a period when Ireland was trading internationally. They were trading with Europe. They were bringing tin from Cornwall. They were using copper within Ireland, starting to do metal work, join pieces of metal together, engraving and working with metal. Also, what we have at this time are some of the oldest objects that are perishable materials. What we have before this really is metal where there was metal and stone, but we have little wooden figures from here. Fairly proportional. The legs are a bit short and it's not absolutely right, but the little figure is not too far away from proportional. Obviously it's female or otherwise there's a part missing, but an example of the sort of craft that was happening in what was a fairly prosperous time in Ireland in the Bronze Age. If we jump forward then, Thomas, again, we're going to the Iron Age. The Celtic people who are most associated with Ireland and who appear to be the dominant culture in Ireland would have arrived during the Iron Age. So this was the time when they were arriving. The Celtic people believed that the person lived inside the head and the body was transportation. So that their culture focused on the head. Hence the two figures on the left that you see, the Bow Island figures, the head is larger than it should be, and that's typical of Celtic times. On the right, we have the Corlick stone, which is a head with three faces and a hole in the center that it could be placed on a stake. So it's believed that this was used for ceremonial purposes. But interestingly, this pre-Christian object relates to three sides of a person, three parts of a person. It may have found its way into the thinking of the trilogy and the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. That type of three gods in one was in existence at that point. You can see also in the middle, that is the front plate of a ceremonial trumpet or horn that was found close to where I live, but you can see the engraving on it is kind of a little bit like the sparrows that you would have seen on the engraved stone at Newgrange, more ornamental, but the dominant motifs on those stones are zigzag lines and spirals, ones and twos and threes of spirals. And you can kind of see a more elaborate version of those spirals on the little trumpet. If you move forward again, Thomas, you move forward to 500 AD. St. Patrick would have arrived just before that 480, 470, somewhere around there. The cross in the center. On the cross in the center, you can see the Celtic knot as we know it today, the Celtic knot perfected, if you like, and that has become kind of the symbol of Ireland. You see it on tourist souvenirs, you see it on brochures advertising Ireland. It's used in all places. That was really the completion of the design at that point. What you have on the right-hand side is a page from the Book of Kells. The Book of Kells really is Ireland's treasure. It's the Mona Lisa of Ireland, or the Sistine Chapel of Ireland. It's the most important piece of artwork or artistic treasure that we have. And on this page, you see the four saints represented within borders with their Celtic knot type of motif in place. On the left-hand side, though, there's a little shrine. I suppose it would be called the Clonmore Shrine. And if you look at the engraving on that, and then compare that to the engraving on the trumpet 1,000 years earlier, pre-Christian, you can see it's so similar it almost looks copied. So whilst the Celtic knot has been perfected, that other earlier spiral type design has continued on. If you skip forward again, the next point of interest on our little 10-minute tour of 5,000 years is when Ireland became an independent nation. The painting on the left is by Sean Keating, who was the president of the Hibernian Academy, the Irish Academy, the equivalent of the Royal Academy. At this time, Ireland was trying to carve out an identity for itself that made it different from all the other people of the British Isles. We're trying to create this unique identity and searching for differences that they could say, this is us, this is our identity, we're different from everyone else in the islands. You see their new flag behind the men. The west of Ireland was considered to be the most rural and the most Irish. So they kind of became the focus of the painting. I don't particularly like this painting, to be honest. To me, it looks a lot like a poster for a John Wayne cowboy film. And it just, to me, it screams someone who's not painting from within their own artistic expression. It's someone who's trying to paint from an Irishness, or this created, it's almost like propaganda. Whereas on the right-hand side, what you have is a painting by an artist called Paul Henry from the same time. In the north, they remained within the British Isles, so they didn't go off. They didn't have this whole political challenge of creating a different and new identity. Paul Henry was also over in the west of Ireland, but what he was painting was his landscape as he lived in it, as he seen it, and how he felt it, painting from within himself. And I think that's a fabulous painting. I think all of those paintings that he made over in the west are actually stunning pieces of work and really capture the time and the period in the way that the work that was trying to capture the time and the period doesn't. So I take it as a lesson. Now, all this I'm giving you is just my opinion. You know, you'll get 1,000,001 different opinions from 1,000,001 different people. But for tonight, I'll give you mine, and sure, why not? If you jump on again, then, Thomas, shortly after that, we have the arrival of modernism in Ireland, brought in largely by 3 women, Minnie Jellett, Evie Hone, and Mary Swansea. These were 3 women from comfortable backgrounds who were able to go to Paris and able to go to Europe and study in the ateliers there, learn from the artists there, and see the new work and understand it, and they brought it back to Ireland. Now, this may be because they were comfortable and could afford to do it. They didn't need to sell their work. Because they were women, unfortunately, at that time, they weren't being taken seriously. So they weren't getting a lot of grief for doing this. But subsequently, it actually turned out that these 3 women were very, very important. They were the initiation of contemporary art in this island. If you look at the work on the left, the work by Minnie Jellett, you can see the little zigzag in the bottom corner. You can see spiral motifs in the middle and zigzags. Round the edge, it's framed in much the same way as the Book of Kells. If you look at the Mary Swansea piece in the middle and think about the shrine and the trumpet, it's a contemporary piece, but there are traces of that in it. Both of those women, whilst they were in Europe and they were painting in the contemporary European style, there's still a fingerprint from here in their work. I can still see that they're speaking in their own unique voice. That's a culmination of all that they have soaked up and taken in. Fabulous. I love it. On the right, then, is an artist called Louis Le Brocq. Those ladies started a movement called the Irish Exhibition of Living Art, which brought through lots of young painters. Louis Le Brocq was one of the artists, the young artists who come up through that Irish Exhibition of Living Art. He painted a lot of work like this, which interests me in that if you think back to the old Celtic on the head and the person inside the head, Louis Le Brocq has always tried to paint the nature of the person, you know, who the person is reflected in their head. More than a physical likeness, he's tried to capture the nature of the person. It's not un-Celtic in its approach, I think. If you jump forward, Thomas, to the next slide, what we have here is 2 bits of contemporary graffiti in Belfast. On the left, you have portraits of IRA men, but you can see round the edge, the Celtic knot, the perfected Celtic knot has been placed round this. Their heads have been placed like the saints in the Book of Kells. This is an attempt to glorify these people, to make them venerable. The picture above tells you what they have been doing, so I'll leave you to decide how they should be viewed. But the picture on the right, and in a way, it's doing what Sean Keating was doing. It's trying to legitimize or create a myth of the time or a propaganda of the time. On the right-hand side, you have graffiti underneath a bridge on the motorway, Over in the other side of Belfast, which would be where the Protestant or Reformed church people live, the guy that painted this graffiti, I suspect he's never set foot in a museum in his life. If he has, he maybe went as a boy at school and paid no attention. I doubt he has ever been to any of the megalithic sites, which are rural and you would need to go see them. I doubt he's ever gone there. But if you look at his graffiti, there's a zigzag and a double spiral directly from 5,000 years earlier in Newgrange. It's so soaked into the vocabulary, the motifs are so ingrained into the culture that he's actually painting 5,000-year-old symbols in his graffiti. So that intrigues me, that the symbols that I found there should turn up in the graffiti of someone who's probably never seen them. So that's kind of a little 10-minute journey through 5,000 years of the history of the art of Ireland. But that's the art that I grew up with and the art that I've seen. And like the guy who spread the double spiral on the wall of Newgrange, those are the motifs that I know and that I can interpret and use for meanings and use in my symbolism. And there's probably some of that. Well, there's definitely some. If I'm being truthful to myself, there's definitely some of that in my work. What I was going to do, Thomas, is if you show the little video that I have, it's a video of me creating work in a camp very similar to the one we shared in Cairo, but in Transylvania this time. But maybe it'll let you see how this permeates into my thinking and my practice, and let you see how it materializes, how this background materializes in me as I go. So hopefully you'll enjoy this. And while you're looking at this, I'm going to go and get my cup of tea and chocolate biscuits, because I think Bethany, everybody deserves a turn. But enjoy the video. And sure, after the video, Thomas, if you want to tape the next part again, by all means do. We look at, I have a few of my paintings up that we can look at the paintings and see what I have done, and you can see if you find any traces of my background in them, and we can have a chat about that. And we're back recording again. Yes. This is actually inside one of the chambers called Four Knocks, which means strong winds. These are really, really protected chambers. You kind of don't get inside. This was a real privilege. It's one of the greatest privileges that I've been granted. I was able to put some paintings, because my work is kind of a little bit like engraving into paint, or drawing with a brush. I had been making paintings of some of these sites and the stones at them. So we took the paintings inside the chamber, and one of the historians, Michael, brought this sounding bowl, which is like a prehistoric instrument that was used for ceremonies back then, and he played the bowl in the middle of the chamber. It was just a fantastic experience. So that was kind of an installation of paintings in one of the sites, but relates to something we had looked at earlier. The next painting then, you'll recognize the little Clonmore Shrine. This was on loan from the National Museum, and I made a painting of a set of paintings of figurative paintings, and we put them in a room in a circumference around the shrine. And the one on the right, which you can just see the corner of, we tried to line up with the winter solstice. I'm not so accurate as the people were 5,000 years ago, but it was an attempt to create like a stone circle. There are stone chippings in the paint to give them like a stone texture. So that was what we were doing there. The next one is called St. Patrick Today. It's about St. Patrick's legacy. The canvas, I had painted the textured canvas, didn't like it, and threw it to one side. And then much later, I had finished a painting and I had some black and blue paint on my table, and I decided I would just paint over the canvas and start again. But when I started to paint over it, I realized I had made the shape of the island of Ireland. roughly. And a lot of my work is art trouvé. It's just what I find as I go along. It kind of involves. So I held on to this because I thought, oh, that's interesting. So when I was asked to make a painting about St. Patrick, I decided I would try to paint his legacy. When St. Patrick came here, Ireland was full of the kingdoms of the High Kings who were constantly at war. And he no doubt thought that he was bringing his Christian message of love that would unite the people and end the wars. And I just think, how ironic is it that we have used his legacy as the primary division between the people of Northern Ireland now, between the Reformed Church and the Catholic Church. So his Christianity, we actually turned it around and used it as our prime source of division. How disappointed would he be? The next one, Thomas, then my history is as a Huguenot. My mum's name, Vint, is direct line Huguenot who fled the persecution of the court of Louis XIV from France. So the Huguenots came to Ireland and they established in 5 centres in Dublin and Cork and Waterford and Portarlington and Lisburn beside where I live. So I visited each of these sites and I picked up little motifs from the sites and made collages. So the one on the right, I also went to La Rochelle, which is where most of the people in Ireland would have exited out to the west. The picture on the right then, at the top, you will see a motif that is actually an abstract drawing of the chandelier that Louis XIV sat under when he signed the revocation of the Edict of Nantes, which started the persecution of the Huguenots. Along the bottom, you can see the little harbour, the profile of the harbour in La Rochelle where people escaped, but also where they were floated out in boats and sunk to kill them. One of the Huguenot motifs is a dove of peace, which is descending from the cross. So I have actually drawn the bird of peace as a dead game bird hung. What I did then with the entire collection was a friend in the French National Archives sent me a copy of the Edict of Nantes. And I blew it up and carved out the letters and made a stencil. And I put the text of the edict all through all 18 paintings. So when they're hung as an exhibition, you can read the text of the edict through the exhibition, which ties it all together. The next one, Thomas, is a set of 3 paintings. I was in Alushta in Crimea and visiting a little Orthodox church. The painting on the left is the tree seen out through the window of the Orthodox church on a rainy day. That was about 2 weeks before Alushta became Russian and the whole Crimea thing was just kicking off as I was there. The picture in the middle are 2 trees that are on the tree line of one of the mountains in the Himalayas over beside the Pakistan border. And they were cutting lumps out of each other at the time. It was really militarized. And I drew one of the trees, but as a composition, it was horrendous. But when I drew them both, the composition seemed to work. And I just thought, what a metaphor for 2 countries standing side by side, facing the same nature and the same rough environment. Could they not live in harmony the way the 2 trees are? The tree on the right is a famous old tree where people used to be hung. Apparently, it's an old legend. So I kind of drew half of the tree like a gallows or like the Grim Reaper reaching out to take a soul. But I doubt the legend is true. I doubt anyone was ever hung from a fairy tree, to be honest. I don't think they're big enough and strong enough. But I liked the story and I thought I would tell a story with it. The next one, Thomas, is 2 friends going off to school. We have a segregated education system in Northern Ireland. There are Catholic church schools and Reformed church schools, Protestant schools, and the kids are sent to these 2 different schools. So 2 friends going to school will be ripped apart to go to 2 different schools. So you can probably interpret from that my opinion of segregated education. But I have put a chasm between the 2 schools. The school on the left is the little Catholic church primary school, and the school on the right is the Protestant state primary school, both in my village. And I put a chasm between them with barbed wire, but the barbed wire at the bottom turns into a zipper. which could be used to close the chasm. So it's that type of symbolism again. Next, Thomas, I put this one in. I don't do commissions. I paint what I like, and I think if I'm not painting it, it'll be like Sean Keating's painting if I paint something for somebody else. But our friend Cervantes, do you remember, from Cairo? Cervantes got in touch with me and asked me to paint a piece for the inaugural collection of the Cavafy Museum in Alexandria. He was one of their old Greek Orthodox poets. And I refused, of course. But then, because we've been talking about him, I went and got one of his books of poems and started reading it and got all interested. And then made this painting, which interprets the poem On the Way to Ithaca, which is about life's journey. So then, having made the painting, I got back to Cervantes quite a bit later and said, I have actually made this, do you want it? And he said, of course. So it's you can see it in the Cavafy Museum now if you're there. The next one, Thomas, I was over in Malta doing an exhibition for the National Museum. Malta has an older history than we do. And this is one of their old prehistoric sites that is actually older than ours. But on Marathon Day, the marathon was cancelled because the days around the marathon, the weather was horrendous. There was thunder and lightning and storms. And the lightning on the stones created a very, very surreal. You could visit the stones, but it created a very surreal environment. So I tried to paint that. So that's an attempt at thunder and lightning on a prehistoric site. The next one is a painting of Aleppo. I was watching the events in Syria unfolding and it was horrendous. And then the refugees, we took some refugees in and it sort of got slightly less horrendous. This is painted on a collage of newspaper clippings about the refugees arriving in Ireland. At the top is an actual building, a ruined building in Aleppo, but as you move down the painting, it becomes more and more abstract and follows the lines of the paint. So it's kind of no foundation to it at all, and it becomes very abstract. But you can see little bits and pieces of imagery from the press of the refugees arriving through the paint. The next painting is the palace, the Banffy Palace in Cluj-Napoca, which houses the National Museum of Art. I was over arranging to make an exhibition for them, and I was there, and that's the first day I was there, and that's nighttime. They had a really bright sky with lots of stars, and I was sitting outside the Banffy Palace, having been in speaking with the team there. So I made a little sketch, and that painting is the National Museum of Art in Cluj-Napoca in the dark. Next one, Thomas, is a Japanese painting. I was in Fukuoka, and in the museum there, they have very, very old screens. Lots of them with trees and blossoms, cherry blossoms on them, lots of them with flying birds. And I made a kind of a collage by taking two of the trees from two different screens and sort of merging them into one tree and then adding one of the flying birds onto one of the branches. My little sensei stamp was given to me when I was there by a good friend Kay, who's a sensei at the university, the art university there in Fukuoka. So I'm now a fake sensei. And the last painting is, you probably know what this is. At the height of the pandemic, Andrea Bocelli did a performance from the Duomo in Milano. And for the last song, he stepped outside onto the steps of the Duomo and sung to an empty square and to empty streets. Haunting. He's a fabulous musician, but the empty city, it was just a really powerful performance. So I froze it on television. I wound it back at the end and froze it and drew it off the television. I was going to draw it much the same as the ruined building in Aleppo in a very minimalist way. But as I started to draw it, I realized if I didn't at least suggest all the bling on the cathedral, it wasn't going to look right. So I had to go on the internet and get myself a photograph of the Duomo to see where the bling was, to be able to suggest it on the front of the building. But again, That's possibly my Mona Lisa that I'll not be able to bring myself to part with. And much the same way Da Vinci felt about his, because it sort of captures the time. And I usually paint in an explosion of painting, but with that, there was so much to it. I kept going back and coming away and going back, and I did half an hour here and there over the course of the entire lockdown. So it kind of, it captures that time for me, and my two daughters were home living with me again, and it just, I don't think I'm ever going to part with it. I think it's just, that's not perfect. It's a bit higgledy-piggledy, but then El Greco's buildings were higgledy-piggledy, and it makes them more interesting. So there you go. That's how the art comes to manifest itself. So yeah, that's what the history is, and how I set about creating a work and some of the work that I have created. And I'll answer any questions you have, or we can just chat for a while, which is nice too.
Thank you very much, Tommy.
That's a pleasure.
Yeah, that was great to see the context of your work and the video and all. And now I'd like to turn it over to the art club to moderate question and answer, and let them introduce themselves.
You're putting the secretary to work again, are you? That job.
This is Leah's first official event. We had to throw her in the deep end.
Oh, it's terrifying. I'm like, oh.
Jude's enjoying this way too much also, having done this.
Oh, yes, she's definitely having fun on just watching from the side.
This is the terrifying seat here. You guys are just turning up to enjoy enjoy.
Oh, it's been amazing listening to you and how you connect your art through history. I'm a big history buff, so this was just amazing to see how you're connecting old traditions and techniques to new and innovative thinking.
I tell you what though, I don't work for the tourist board there, but I can so recommend a trip to Malta to you. It's just loaded with history. It's a really, Valletta is a beautiful city. It's a small city with a wall, no traffic inside. The main part of it is the big main boulevard. The museum, it was actually a palace of the Knights of St. John, is very typical of the architecture in the building. Lots of cafes opening out onto the streets. Enough history to keep you interested. A beautiful old city. You see for 5 or 6 days, and the food seems to be mostly grown on the island. So it's not, you know if one of your friends grows a tomato and you eat it, it tastes so different from the tomato out of the supermarket. The food in Malta kind of tastes like that. It's not too expensive and full of history. There you go, Lee. There's a holiday destination for your bucket list.
Actually, my older sister has been to Ireland. She was there a few years ago, and she was fascinated by all of the history. And just
no, Malta is the place. But come to Ireland too. Come here too.
Sorry.
Come here too.
I was connecting more with like the Irish history, or more or less the design and patterns that have transcended time.
Oh, come here too. We don't have the sunshine. We don't have the little walled city, but
neither do we. That's okay.
Oh yeah, we're used to that.
Let Charlotte know when you're coming, and she can come over and be your guide. I've shown her everything already.
Oh
yes, absolutely. And then you can come to our place.
Oh.
I don't know if Tom has told you, but in this area, in the kind of the general area where the college is located, we have a big we had a big Irish Irish people coming into the country around for a while. I know Worcester, where Jude and I both live, there was a point where that was like the largest number of Irish people outside of Ireland or something like that.
My parents are Irish from Worcester. Just wanted to add that.
Oh,
and I live in Worcester too.
We're all here.
Yeah, so pretty much everybody here kind of like got like some relative that's like O'Malley or something.
Oh, Glasgow over here.
If you're trying to find Irish, over there, you need to look in New York, Chicago, or Boston
Yes.
or Boston. Although having
Yes.
said that,
We're near Boston though.
the
The
one
infamous
event,
Boston Irish.
the one event I did in Boston was the two Huguenot paintings that I showed you that were the collages of the Huguenot motifs from here. I showed that collection in the French Culture Center
Okay.
on what is in Back Bay. I forget the name. Marlborough Street, is it in Back Bay?
Mm,
Just down from the green. So I showed that there. A friend, Mary, works in Boston Uni, and she does a program called Transcultural Exchange. And I was over for her conference, and at the same time did an exhibition for the. There's no point in going if you don't do an exhibition well when you're there.
it does make it more memorable.
But I definitely second that. I have, for ages, have said that I would love to go visit the various British islands. I've got family heritage from Ireland, Scotland, and England. I would love to just go and like travel around and see everything.
Kat,
And
were you
then-
going to did
And
your
then
hand
Kat,
up?
I did see your hand.
I just wanted to talk about what you were saying about, well, I just wanted to comment,
Yeah.
and maybe you might have something to say about it. I went to Ireland. It's the only country outside of the US I've been to besides Canada. And I went a couple of years ago, and I remember going to Dublin and I'm like, why am I here? It looks like Boston. And then within a couple of days, it's like, it's a completely different feel. The people are totally different. So when you were talking about people and the land and how they belong to the land. I mean, when I left Ireland, I cried. It was too quick. I was only there for 3 days, and it was just the people, getting immersed in the people and the food. And it was just something I've just never experienced. And I just wanted to let you know that I really get what you mean about that.
We are always told if you're going to live in the States, you should go to Boston because it feels in some way like home. And that's a common kind of feel, more so than Chicago and New York. And I don't know why, but we do seem to constantly hear, well, you probably start in Boston because it feels a bit like home. But you didn't feel it, or did you feel it similar to Boston and Wales? Boston is obviously more affluent, or at least the part I mean, Back Bay and that kind of area.
I think the architecture, sorry, Bethany.
Beacon Hill.
I was just saying the architecture looks the same to me a lot,
Yeah.
but the
But
feeling of
the
the people
people
isn't
not
the
so-
same.
No.
Well, after you are there for a few days, it's just different. It's,
Yeah.
So I work in a barbershop, and I've actually had several clients that have immigrated from Ireland. And they all say that the weather also is pretty comparable, except for like when we're like really hard into winter here, that it's still kind of the same kind of windy, kind of fogginess.
Possibly. If I do emigrate to America, look, I'm not going to need you.
You would be amazed by what people come to see me for.
May I say, I was just going to notice that so much relates to international residencies, which as students, I would encourage you to pursue, because as Tommy says, getting to know the people, getting to network with others, share the food, share the environment has just been such a great part of both of my husband's and my lives. And I think Tommy shows that in his artwork. And if you're at all interested in different cultures, it's really a very important part of being an artist.
It is kind of like what I said in the video. That's where the energy comes from, the work. That's where the inspiration comes from. You know the way if you go into someone's home for the first time and there's a little cobweb in the top corner of a room. You see it. But after you've been going in and out of the room for a week, you don't see it anymore. And when you go somewhere, you see it with kind of fresh eyes. You see everything, you soak it up. And meeting people and hearing their stories can be inspirational as well. So I just think it energizes the work, and it energizes you as an artist, and it's well worth doing. And there's a big network out there. Making the first couple of connections are the tricky part. But once you make a few connections and you start travel, it's a great big world. And you meet people like Thomas. Couldn't be bad.
And then
We're all very
Jude,
glad to have met him.
Jude, were you about to say something?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had a question.
I had a quick question that was kind of, I guess, off topic from a cultural standpoint, but more to the like process of creating your pieces. So earlier you'd mentioned including chips of stone in the paint, and I was curious as to the process of doing something like that and working out different ways that would affect the overall look of the painting, and if that draws over into any of your other pieces, just because I'd noticed like very interesting textures and values, and I wanted to delve into that.
The first time I did that was the paintings that you saw in the chamber in Fornox. And what I was trying to do was paint old stones, almost like the curbstones. I was kind of working from that idea that what the cave painters did was they would have seen a shape on a cave wall or in the rocks that reminded them of something. And then they would have added paint to enhance that. Now, I know they also did hand stencils, but some of the bisons and the animals and somewhere like Chauvet, they've actually brought out what was already there. Pardon me, and I was going to start painting these stones. So what I decided I would do, excuse me, is I would make like abstract backgrounds, and then I would enhance those to bring the shapes out. But I kind of knew what shapes I wanted, but it was kind of like that. So I mixed stone chippings in the paint, and then I applied it really, really rough and allowed it to dry. So I had got these textured backgrounds. And then I kind of looked for shapes and things in them. And sometimes when I was painting them, if I knew what I was going to paint, I would have deliberately done something that would give me some roughly that shape to work with. But it was all very slapdash and accidental and creating these textured surfaces. So then when I came to do the Huguenot paintings and I wanted to do the 5 sites, but I wanted to do them like church windows, but I wanted to ground them on the ground of these 5 sites. I thought, aha, I should do that again. I should get stone chippings and make these rough backgrounds and then turn them around and see how they would fit together and try to collage the motifs over the ground. So that's kind of what I was thinking and how it manifested itself. But it was basically get a big handfuls of stone chippings into the paint and work as rough as you possibly can to create the roughest, most textured kind of almost like the stone wall that I'm going to look for shapes in. And that was kind of what was going. I had to use oil paint there. Some of the black and silver things are metallic acrylic paint, but they don't hold material well. They're all right for painting over. What I have done is made collages of newspaper and then covered over that with medium, which gives you like a smooth surface with the paintings, with the newspapers buried into it. And you can paint over that with metallic blacks and silvers and gold. But for the other, I used oil and acrylic. I tend, or not acrylic, oil and alkyd. I tend to use alkyd white because it dries more quickly, and if you're really heaping on paint, it's going to take a lifetime to dry. So if you use, I paint first with a layer of alkyd white and then with the oil colors over the top, and then that causes it to dry more quickly because zinc white won't dry for the rest of your life. But I don't use the colors from the alkyd range because I find them to be a bit plastic and a bit artificial. And I like the oily sort of feel and the colors of oil paints, but certainly use the whites and grays and all good to speed up your drying time, and throw a bit of liquid in as well.
I was about to ask about that actually, because I had noticed in the video that you were clearly working with an acrylic, because I saw it on the model. But then I was looking at the techniques, and I said that was thinking that almost looked more like almost like a reductive technique with like a turpentine or something in some places. And I was trying to figure out if you had done that.
Where I'm working with acrylic, I tend to just throw in water and use it almost like a kind of watercolor technique. But then whenever I'm detailing over the top of it, there's a medium that I use. I think it's a Winsor Newton medium, and it slows it down. So once I get started to actually doing the detailed work with the brush, I add this medium, which slows it down, and it means I can actually do my drawings and things at the speed that I do for the oil paintings. But when I'm working with oil, I use distilled turpentine if I want to get to a watercolor type of technique, and you can really dilute your paint with turpentine. And it runs them out. And then if I want to dry it more quickly, in the same way as I use the medium to dry the acrylics more quickly, I use linseed, or I use liquid to dry the oils more quickly. So the medium slows the acrylic, and the liquid speeds up the oils. And those are the only mediums I really use. It's kind of water and medium, you know, slow drying medium in the acrylics, and liquid in the liquid and turpentine, distilled turps in the oils. There's lots of other linseed oils and things that you can use, but I just don't have any purpose for them.
And then I noticed that Kat did have a question again, so you can feel free to pop on in.
Where are you? Yeah.
I do collages too, and you were talking about working with newspaper. The biggest thing I'm concerned about, because collage is like really my thing. I feel that that's one of my strongest things. But how do you get like newspaper to hold up? And I use tissue paper as well, and it looks great right now, but I don't know how long that would last. So do you have ways to make things like that last?
What I do is I put on the canvas, I put a layer of medium. So I just cover it over in a good layer of medium. I then lay out the newspapers on top in the way that I want them. And I put another layer of medium over the top of that. So in actual fact, the newspaper is completely sealed inside this, which gives me like a resilient surface where the newspaper is not exposed to the air in any way, shape, or form. It's kind of buried inside this layer of almost completely transparent paint. Now, when I'm working with oils, with the other mediums, I tend to use like fibers and small stone chippings and what have you. But in those scenarios, I'm painting fairly thick and fairly coarse, and those are buried in the paint as well. So on both of those ways of working, none of the material is protruding from the paint. There's none of the medium exposed. With the oils, it's purely to create the shapes and textures, and with the other, it's sealed inside this layer. But maybe your work, Kat, the materials do protrude from the paint, do they? Or
Yeah. I don't seal it, but that's something I could do. I never thought of that before. I like the fact that like with the tissue paper, it kind of comes out a little. Like it comes, like I like stuff that like it's almost not 3D, but it's not totally flat. But like learning how to preserve it isn't.
There's always, with tissue paper on the surface, there's always going to be a vulnerability to that work. You're creating a conservationist, conservator's nightmare.
Yes.
When they get something into the museum And they see this and they have to conserve that. There's going to be a lot of head scratching going on. And John was,
Thank you.
he was going to say something as you were speaking. He's maybe gone. I thought he maybe knew something about, or maybe worked with multimedia.
I don't know, but I do know that we do have 3 more questions. I have Susan next, so you can hop on in, Susan.
Yeah.
Hi, Tommy.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. This is another of our friends from Cairo.
Good to see you.
Introduce yourself.
Salam alaikum.
I really enjoyed that video. I thought it was the essence of painting and how that experience can really inform your work and just your life. And I thought it was put together so well. I really enjoyed that. And I really think a lot of people should try to do residencies when they can.
A gentleman called Olympio, who is now a very good friend. His job is, I think, making the little shorts for the news agency. So if there's an event happening somewhere, a sports event or a riot or something, Olympia will go and make the little short that's shown on the national news. So that's his job, and he's a genius. The man is a genius.
It was really put together beautiful. Yeah.
Right.
But so good to see you, Shar, Thomas. And I hope we get to see each other in person.
We're only across the river from each other.
I know, but with the pandemic,
what, 20 minutes?
Right. I know. Actually, I
We're
used
trying to get Tommy to come visit us.
I know.
I actually have an idea. I have an idea for Charlotte that may well result in a visit. But if I'm there, I'll let you.
What's that?
You too, Thomas. I'll let you know.
Okay.
Oh, there's your mom.
Oh, okay.
You also need to come out to Boston so we can teach you about our accents.
Okay.
People down south have a hard time understanding me.
We all understand. We all understand your accent. I actually have a friend, Guy, who's a Norwegian, who speaks with an accent exactly the same as yours. And I said, Guy, in Norway, where on earth did you speak like that? And his answer was, Kojak, baby.
My grandmother's from Tennessee, and her sisters do not understand a word I'm saying.
Well, y'all gotta speak more slowly.
Okay, Rick, go ahead.
In the scenes around the church, there was a shot that looked like it was up in the balcony where there were several artists sitting up there. It looked like you may have been doing a rubbing of part of the woodwork. Is that what was going on? Were you bringing out the history of the stories of the people who sat there and scratched them into the wood?
That's exactly what was going on downstairs in the church.
Delightful.
All the pews were lovely. And upstairs in the balcony, there were 2 rows of pews. And the front of the pew where you would set your hymnal or your prayer book had all the names and faces. And, you know, one of them was a donkey with obviously a male donkey who was gifted, all scratched all over all these tops. So what we did was we got this big roll of tissue paper. We rubbed the surface of the pew, and then we hung that in the library. We hung it around 3 walls of the library because
that's
the guy who was out.
Wonderful.
I liked working outside because I liked to chuck paint around. And Christian, the artist who was there, that was his country. That was his village. He grew up there, and he went to the school that we were using for our accommodation. So that would have been the church he attended and the school that he attended. And his,
any of his scratchings.
There could have been some of his there, but the library that we were using had been the old staff room of the school. when he was a pupil there. So he put his exhibition in the library.
Yeah.
So we put that round the three walls of the library as part of his exhibition. Really good. It was the history of the people of the village.
Yeah.
In their own hand.
Yeah.
You see, you do a residency and you meet all kinds of people with all kinds of crazy ideas and all kinds of crazy ways of hanging exhibitions and putting stuff. Actually, the guy who you saw in the video with me when we went back to meet Perianu was a German photographer called Frank. And him and I, we did our exhibition as a two-person exhibition in the church, in the little old medieval church. So people were doing exhibitions all over the place. Elizabeth was very good. She basically said, where do you go and find somewhere to do your exhibition? So nice way to work. Nice way to work.
I have a question.
It's not good if you're a panicker, but if you are kind of very relaxed about the whole thing, it's fabulous.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I noticed that you have spent some time in places where there are conflict, and I was wondering if you had spent time there when there was conflict going on, and if you ever intentionally use your art for peace building.
Well, my friend Ashit invited me to Kashmir. And I said, yeah, when are we going? And he said, are you going to come? And I said, yes, of course. And he said, that's militarized. And I said, I grew up in Northern Ireland. when did we start? So I kind of went there. Now, the painting of the two trees at the top of the Himalayas, that was a sketch that I made when I was there. And I actually created the painting back in the studio. But that was, when I was there, that was really militarized. 4 days after I left, there was a major bomb on one of the big roads between Pakistan and India, and the whole place went in lockdown. There was no TV stations, there was no newspapers. The university, the campus was sealed. It's a Hindu university, but with mostly Muslim pupils. It was sealed. The staff, who are, a lot of them are Hindus, couldn't actually go out in the Srinagar. So within 4 days, if I had been there a week later, I wouldn't have got home. And it really was, well, at one point, but you get caught out as well, because at one point we were in one of the villages up towards the border, and there was an election coming up, and there was only one set of posters up. To which I should said, well, there's no point in the other party putting the posters up here. But the soldiers were standing on top of the houses in broad sunlight, with the sun beaming down on them, really hot, just standing on the roofs of houses. And we were walking down the street, and a couple of these soldiers started to follow us. And I said, oh, those guys are following us. They said, don't worry about it. So eventually we stopped, and these guys caught up with us. And one of them said something in their own language, probably Punjabi or something. And I said, no, sorry, I'm English. I'm Irish, I speak English. I says, oh, that's great. We thought you were Europeans. And very good English. And he said, can we stop for a chat? Can we stop and chat to you? And I said, yeah, you were. We saw you coming along the street. We thought you were watching us. And he says, yeah, well, we were, but we would like to have a conversation. So we stopped and we chatted for a while. And I was thinking, these are hardened military people. These are people who are defending the Indian border against Pakistan. They'll be killing machines, for lack of a better word. It actually turned out that the guy had a degree in architecture from the university in Delhi. And he was an officer in the army. And he was saying he was hoping to be this, that, or the other by the time he left his military service. This was a really educated graduate of the university in Delhi who had joined the army. So it just shows you. And there was me thinking these are just rough, dangerous people. Actually very, very, very educated, very civilized people in a terrible situation. So you can misread the situation and misread and typecast people so badly. But your question about did I do anything that was like a reconciliation, or no, I didn't really. I had sympathy for them, and I understood their thinking, and I understood their attitudes towards each other, and it perhaps informed my painting. But it's not my conflict, and to stumble in, if I started using their symbolism without even knowing what the undertones for their symbolism is, I wouldn't even know what I was saying, and I actually, when I was in Egypt, Thomas, I was speaking to Abel Naga, and there was a really nice like candle with a flame on it that I was looking at. And I said to Abel Naga, that's a really interesting motif. That could be adopted in that painting really well. And Abel Naga said, oh, but that's a symbol that represents Muhammad. That mightn't be well received. So it's just, the lesson is there. Other people's, what motifs mean in other cultures, and what you're actually saying when you use those in a painting, you might not be fully understanding. And all you can be is really respectful of the people, and but you can't start painting outside your own self, you know. And it would be nice. It'd be nice to do something that was a reconciliation. And if someone ever suggested I've used my exhibitions here and workshops for that purpose. We brought. I was in the National Museums of Northern Ireland in Armagh. I painted an exhibition for them, and as part of that, I did a little workshop, and they brought kids from two different youth clubs, one in a very Protestant area and one in a very Catholic area, and they came together at the same time, and we painted together in a room, and I showed them how to paint. And it actually ended off for them. These kids were 15 and they were looking cigarette breaks. So the teacher was there, and I said, the cigarette breaks are your concern, you supervise. But it ended off with the kids from the different groups going out and having cigarettes together and communicating with each other. And there's every possibility that they hadn't actually ever, based on where they lived, one of the groups, I wouldn't be surprised if they had never even met somebody from the other community. So that was a nice thing to do and a positive thing to kind of do, but it was within the scope of what I understood, and it wasn't painting anything reconciliatory. It was using the exhibition for a positive purpose, and I'd be keen to do that. We actually, when we were in Rabat, we organized for the pupils from all the kids from a really big orphanage to come out to the seaside, and we set up these tables at the seaside and give them some rough materials, and we made some things together, and then we went and played on the beach for a while. And one of those kids was saying that he had never been to the seaside. So art, in the same way that an artist, a successful artist, is usually good at spotting an opportunity. You know, they usually have the kind of eye that if an opportunity goes past the front of them, they see it. And I kind of think, because it's a privilege to be an artist, there's an obligation on you to see an opportunity to use your art for something positive and good. And if you're the sort of artist who can see an opportunity for yourself, you should be the sort of artist who can see an opportunity to do something worthwhile with your practice. And that's kind of an obligation that I think every artist should step up to. Carefully, of course. But have I rambled around the answer to your question, Sue?
You
Or
actually came to it. You actually came to it when what you did with the Catholic and Protestant children is a peace building activity. It's those little steps. You know what I mean? And you were in a place where you did something that brought them together, and maybe able to see each other differently. And it's little steps like that that eventually get you there. That is peace building work.
Yeah. It's an obligation.
Yeah.
Okay, Jude, now you can go.
Sorry, I had to figure out how to unmute myself. So I just wanted to know, I work with collage and oil separately, and I was wondering what drove you to mix the two, and maybe how you came upon each of those mediums independently and then, you know, made a crossover.
With collage and with the collage, with the collage and the oils, it was really things to put into the paint to make the textures, to make the rough textures. So I didn't really see the materials I was collaging as anything other than potential shapes underneath the surface of the paint. The collages with the acrylics are different in that when I have acrylic, I've thrown lots of stuff into the oils, the stone chippings and fibers and pieces of wood and sand and just whatever I've had, leaves and things I've thrown in, dried leaves. But with the acrylics, what I wanted was the newspaper to come through. I wanted, you know, whilst I sealed the paper in this transparent layer and I painted over the top, I have never completely covered it. So the stories underneath and the pictures and things underneath are part of the image, if you like, part of the visual or the story. Maybe not answering your question. Do you want to ask it again?
No, I think that was a good explanation. Yeah, that was perfect, actually.
Anna, you haven't asked me a question yet.
No, but now if I can, I would love to know.
Both Annas haven't asked me a question.
Yeah, so I have just a quick one. With the painting of the palace, I misheard it. I think you said it, but I would love to know which palace is it? It's
called the Banffy Palace. If you look up National Museum of Art in Cluj-Napoca in Romania, Clujnapoca, that palace is now the National Museum of Art. And that's it. That's it in darkness under the stars.
Oh, thank you.
It's not so far away that you couldn't visit someday.
Oh yeah, I would love to. But now with the corona going on.
If you're going, tell me when you're going, because I know the curators there and I'll have someone meet you and give you a nice little tour. And maybe even
wow, that would be an honor to me. Thank you.
Other Anna, have you questions? I'm putting you under pressure.
No, I'm good. Thank you. Good work. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay, Cheryl, I think you're probably going to be our last question for tonight so we can get Tommy home, but go for it.
Yeah, so just to kind of touch on what you were saying about creating art that has an effect on somebody else, I just wrote down a TED Radio, our podcast that I listened to recently, which is how art changes us. It kind of addresses that. The other thing I wanted to say is, firstly, before I forget, your work is amazing. I think all of us can relate to it. There's so much movement, so much emotion in it. It's like we're tapping into you. So that's very inspirational for me, who's trying to still find my voice. But what I was going to say, coming from South Africa and having lived through apartheid, sometimes there's a beauty in not really knowing exactly both sides of a situation when you walk into it, because you're coming in just to enrich people's lives, and you're not caught up in the drama that's happening in that particular place. And so you're in the best position to try or to unknowingly have an effect that people who are kind of engrossed in what's happening in their lives, where they're living the conflict, they don't have that ability to be able to just step out and, bridge the gap.
Yeah, that's one of the joys of the camp that we did in Sinsor, in that the part of the village that I was down in with those people would be referred to with a term that might be considered derogatory now, but they would be referred to as the gypsy camp. And to just go down and to use one of those people as the subject of my painting is a statement in itself. You know, it's because Periano was a real old gentleman. He really was. He hasn't had an easy time, you know, and there's the story of the Good Samaritan, you know, and we were painting in a church. So even just by doing nothing more than by making that my choice of subject, I was doing something, you know, something safe, but something positive, I think.
Yep.
Watching his face when you showed him the picture of the painting was like, it was just amazing just to watch, just his whole being light up. He's so
well, hopefully his living room is decorated now. Thomas, actually, because you were videoing before and after, you could, if you like, send the link that you have to that video, to Olympia's video on YouTube. You could send that out to everyone, and they can go and see it at their leisure. In fact, send it out to the class, whether even people who haven't turned up, send it out, and please feel free to share it with who you like. You know, it's
okay.
But
I'm just about to ask if we
Tommy,
can get that.
So I just want to say something. I want to make a plug for you, Tommy. I went to see if you had a website and if you have any books for sale. So I plan on purchasing some.
I suffer from the difficulty of all artists in that I'm not a marketing person. I don't like trying to sell. I'm not comfortable selling. I'm comfortable talking about what the art's about. I'm not comfortable talking about it. But you need to be able to walk in somewhere and, you know, tell them what you do and show you. So what I do is every 4 years, I create this journal. It's nice for me because I can collect my memories into this journal, and I can have a read afterwards and see photographs of people and places and things. But it means what I can do is I can also walk into a museum and say, there's me, there's what I do. Can I leave that with you, please? Is it all right if I give you a phone call in a week's time? I'm going to ask you if you would be interested in doing something together. I'll not be in any way troubled if you say no, because there are lots of places, but I only make suggestions in places that are of particular interest to me. And if I wasn't interested in doing something here and interested in what you do, I wouldn't be making the proposal. But there's more places than I can ever cover. Can I leave that with you? Can I ring you in a week? And so I use that for my marketing. And that's the full extent of the range of my marketing abilities, is leaving my journal with people and saying, I would like to work with you here. But I tend to like old buildings and old places and things of interest. And I use the journal as an introduction for that. Probably there are people amongst you who are much better at marketing than I will ever be. But that lets me off the hook and lets me do something. So what's in the journal is the first half of the journal is the sort of 15 or 16 better paintings from the time, and the back half is the 13 or 14 better symposiums or trips or exhibitions from the time. So it kind of tracks my travels. Actually, on my Facebook, there's a link to that video on my Facebook. But what there also is on my Facebook is, over the pandemic, I thought I would give people a little virtual visit to my studio. So for 20 days, I posted a photograph every day for 20 days of my studio and studio gardens, to give them like a kind of a little virtual visit. So if you go in there and you look through, you'll see day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and each day there's a photograph on Charlotte's smiling. She has seen them already. There's a photograph of my studio and my workshop, and, you know, kind of what I was doing. And on day 20, there's actually a link to that video. So it's another way to find the video. But Thomas, if you send it out, it's easier for people. My Facebook is T-Bar Art, just a string of 8 letters, TBARRART. It's not private. It should be open. It's an art thing more than a personal thing. So by all means, go and play with that.
Related to what Cheryl was saying about your book, do you happen to sell prints?
No. And
breaking my heart here.
Bethany, he needs a marketing person.
All right. Kind of not neither professional enough nor interested enough to kind of. It's just I kind of don't. I don't do. I tend to work with. I've got paintings at the minute. If you like one, you can buy it. That tends to be my marketing approach. You're never. The way I do things, you're never going to be rich, but it's great fun.
Well, thank you very much, Tommy. I think we should let you go. It's I think it's like midnight over there.
Hold on. Yes, it was midnight over here.
No wonder you needed tea.
So everybody, thanks for joining, and look for our next events, and I'll be sending out a link for this recording soon.
Charlotte, can I give you a ring tomorrow? Are you on Facebook Messenger?
Yes.
Are you about tomorrow? Are you around tomorrow?
We'll be here.
I'll give you a call.
Yes, we're stuck in.
I have a suggestion for you.
All right, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, Tommy.
It was lovely to meet you all. It was lovely to meet you.
Tommy, I'll be in touch to catch up with you too.
Yes, please do.
Okay.
I would say good night, everyone, but it's actually not nighttime at all.
It's evening. It's like, for us, it's like 7 p.m. in Massachusetts.
And Jude, get back to it next year. Yeah.
Thank you, Tommy. Thank you,
Thank
Thomas.
you so much.
Bye. Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.